Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with the squat is obviously the starting position. So first thing I'm going to have Noah do is reach out to the bar just outside of shoulder width apart and duck under the bar. So with like any other exercise, I'm going to ask him just to find a comfortable spot for his hand placement. Usually, like I said, that's just about shoulder width apart. So as far as placement for the bar on the back, this is called high bar, and this is just like at the highest point of his traps, just below his neck. This requires the least amount of shoulder mobility. We have another positioning that we can use, maybe more comfortable for them, called low bar, which is just a couple inches lower, about at the middle point of the traps and in line with the shoulders. So, but again, this requires just a little bit more shoulder mobility, and his high bar tends to be more comfortable for clients. So once Noah's gotten to this position, I'm going to ask him to step up, take a couple steps back, and for feet positioning, more or less we want his toes pointed towards the wall or towards wherever he's facing, but the client is allowed to rotate his feet in or out, just finding a comfortable position for them. So as far as placement, you want it about shoulder width apart, or again, just finding a nice, good, comfortable position that they can squat from. Okay, now that the client is in the starting position, like we've just taught, we're going to now have him perform the squat movement. So we'll do this by telling the client to not so much bend at the knees, but set his hips back like he is sitting into a chair, like so. Now he's going to reach about 90-degree angle at his knees and then push back up, specifically trying to push through the heels. So we'll have Noah perform that one more time. Set the hips back, about 90 degrees at the angle, and push through the heels. So some things to take note of here is the angle of his torso. So if he wants to remain a little more vertical, Noah will show, you'll see that his knees are pushed forward a little bit more in the squat. So again, this is just a comfort thing, but just advise your client that they can move their torso through different angles just based on what's most comfortable for him. So that was a more vertical torso angle. There's also a little bit lower, more horizontal angle. You can see that keeps the knees a little bit pushed back. So this isn't going to limit pain or anything of that matter or cause more damage. One cause more damage than the other. This is just solely based on comfort. Okay, so the first squat compensation that we are going to discuss is called the minor valgus wink, as Noah will perform here. So as you can see, both of his knees for a split second kind of shoot inwards, and this is actually okay. This is not something we need to address. This is actually the adductors assisting in the squatting movement. A movement that we do, or compensation that we do need to address, is called the true knee valgus, as Noah will perform, and you will see that it is performed throughout the movement. This is something we need to address, and as compared to the minor knee valgus wink. All right, so the next squatting deviation or compensation that you might see with a client is called excessive spinal flexion, as Noah will demonstrate. And a way to cue this is at the bottom and remind the patient to have their chest faced up. All right, the next squatting deviation / compensation that we're going to look over is called the butt wink. So I have Noah demonstrate. Watch the hips. As you can see, his hips kind of rotate underneath them at the bottom of the squat. So a way we can fix this, Noah wants the rack, is have them pick up a lighter weight, so 5 to 10 pounds, hold it straight out in front of them, and perform the squat. This will help keep the hips from rotating underneath Noah. So once he gets this position, he's going to drop the weight and squat back up. So we'll have Noah do it one more time. Just pick up a light 5 to 10 pound weight, hold it straight out in front, go to the bottom, drop the weight, and squat. Okay, so the last compensation we are going to show for the squat is called heel off. So as Noah will demonstrate, as he's going to the bottom of the squat and he pushes off, his heels will come off the ground. So a way to fix this for the client is reminding them to sit back into the squat and to push through their heels. So again, sit back into the squat and drive through the heels. Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to talk about cueing and modifying the squat. First thing we're going to talk about is cueing, and here's 3 cues that we decided to present on. So the first one is staying back on heels. As you can see in my diagram, I tried to find some pictures that kind of gave a decent idea of what you'll kind of see if they're not following these cues. As you can see on the right here, this guy's heels are coming significantly off the ground during the push off from the squat. So ideally more what we're looking for is this guy over here to the left. Very firm base, but you can see his heels in the back are on the ground. So this gives him a better platform to push off from. The next cue we decided to go with is making sure you're cueing that they push their knees apart at the bottom of the squat. So you can see what happens when you don't do that. You can see this guy's knees are shooting in. And like we kind of stated in the videos before, that a little bit of this shooting in, quote unquote, of the knees is okay, because that just means that your adductors are getting engaged. But if it's significant and goes throughout the entire movement of the squat, then this becomes an issue. So we want to really make sure that we tell the patient, or the client rather, that you drive your knees out, and that will look more like this position. And the last cue we decided to go with is making sure you're sitting back into the chair. So what happens is if you're not sitting back in the chair, one, your heels may come up off the ground, but as you can see by this pointing of the arrow, the knees might shoot forward a little bit, and that might put an excessive amount of stress on the knees. So to kind of equal out that stress, often, or take some of that stress off the knees and more onto the hips, you will instruct the client to squat like you're sitting back into a chair rather than just bending at the knees. So a couple things to do to modify the exercise is, first we'll talk about the modifiable factors. We'll then talk about what it means to ensure proper bracing. We'll also talk about if the patient, or if the client rather, is lacking range of motion, maybe in any one of the joints that is moving, that there's some there's some things you can do to exercise to modify the range of motion, and some suggestions for other exercises that the client can do. So first, we'll talk about changing the modifiable factors excuse me, within the movement. And we've kind of talked about these before. And so that's bar placement, making it, high or low bar, torso angle, whether they have more horizontal or vertical torso angle, and then changing their foot width, or the way the foot is rotated. So like I said, we've kind of talked about these before, and all 3 of these are it is purely based on client preference, what is most comfortable and feels most natural to them. So next thing we'll talk about is ensuring proper bracing. So before you engage doing a squat, you want to make sure that you instruct the client to take a deep breath and engage the core real tight. And then you want to make sure, as you can see in this picture down here, this guy is pinching his shoulder blades together. So you want to do all 3 of these steps: take a deep breath, engage your core, then pinch shoulder blades together, and then do the squat. Next thing we'll talk about is changing the range of motion of a squat, and this is very straightforward. Nothing complex about this. Essentially, if your client is lacking range of motion at any joint, you can shorten the movement of the squat. You don't have to go down to 90 degrees every time.
Is it beneficial that you get strength throughout the entire range of motion? Of course. But limiting it to just quarter squats, half squats, or doing something like a high box squat, you're getting a lot of the same benefits and still engaging the same muscle groups um, that you want to target while doing the squat. And the last thing we'll talk about is just finding another exercise. So maybe your client's just not a big fan of doing the barbell back squat or what have you. So some other options that engage mostly the same muscle groups is just doing something like a leg press, or doing something like a goblet squat, or a dumbbell squat, or a front squat. Any one of these they're great. It may not be the exact same thing as a barbell back squat, that you're loading the exact same musculature, but more or less you're strengthening the lower extremity, which ultimately is what we want. And just we want to find something that the client enjoys, and so that's the most important thing here. I've heard before that um, the best exercise program is the one you'll stick with, and so just finding something that the client can enjoy is the most important thing here.